Hello, I'm Stacie Lee Bennett-Worth.
And I'm Anne Molloy.
And in this short video, we're going to discuss the role of creative digital technologies in performing arts education and share our tried and tested methodologies and approaches for incorporating digital tools into the performing arts classroom. I'm an artist researcher working at the intersection of performance, film and installation, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Institute of Creative Technologies at Montfort University. And this study aims to provide a sort of proof of concept for encouraging digital creativity in Level 3 performing arts. And in 2018, so 3 years ago now, I first contacted Anne as part of the initial phase of this research in a hope that we could work together with her students to explore some of these ideas.
Yes, it was one of those lovely random emails that you pick up and you think, oh, this could be really interesting. And it has been. It's been absolutely brilliant to, involve ourselves so much in exploring the use of digital technology. Because I remember at the time it was all in terms of Ofsted and looking at us using technology more in the classroom. And so it was a key moment where I thought, oh yes, this could be of real use and has been for my own professional development and also for the development of my current students at the time. I'm teaching performing arts. I deliver an acting course through the UAL Level 3 Extended Diploma. I teach on both the first year and the second year. And as I said, our pathway is acting and performance work in theatre.
This research was initially designed in response to initial consultation with higher education institutions, awarding bodies and industry professionals as well, and it aims to find a way to redress the national shortfall in digital performance capabilities of those young people studying at Level 3 then going on to higher education courses. And it really hopes to find ways to encourage a sort of technological sensibility and an understanding of how to explore and play with digital technologies and tools in that level of performing arts education. What I found was that a really vital component of this work has been to address what can realistically be achieved as well in these centres as we attempt to bridge the gap between Level 3 and Level 6. There's had to be a lot of attention paid to the participants' limited access to specialised digital tools and, those reduced teaching contact hours at Level 3 and actually also fewer training opportunities for teachers and facilitators specifically in this area. So this work actually prioritises the tools that we have available, perhaps even in our pockets. This could be, your smartphone devices or the projector that you have that's in the theatre space. Maybe it's up in the rig, but that it can still be used as part of this kind of approach to work. Audio recorders, digital cameras, those kind of things that you may have lying around in the department, but you haven't potentially used as part of your practice. This is kind of what this work foregrounds and celebrates and explores. And now, 3 years on from when we first began this research, of course, the focus on digital creativity and how we're going to use different digital tools to express ourselves in the arts has accelerated tenfold, with, of course, courses now nationally being shifted to remote learning due to the pandemic. So throughout this conversation, we're going to give an overview of our project and hopefully provide some insight and inspiration for future work, both in the studio and beyond the studio space. So Anne, I'm just going to kick off and I'm hoping you can answer this question for any teachers that might be listening. But could you just explain what the level of usage of digital technologies was within your department before the work and how that's changed throughout the work that we've done together?
Yeah, so I kind of reiterate what you said there. We had a projector sitting in the rig, and we would, particularly for kind of things like a performance workshop, we would use the projector for visual projections to enable students to have scenes that they could appear in front of. So it remained fairly static. We did, of course, have cameras, and we used those for filming evidence. And also I'd started to move into teaching students acting techniques for camera. So we'd started to explore a little bit of camera work, a little bit of film work already. So in terms of actually using digital technology within the performance itself, it was very, very limited. And I think, kind of looking back to 3 years ago, looking at how the Wi-Fi was within the college, the use of EduRoam, and I think all teachers, when it comes to work, you like to feel like you're in control. And so a lot of that felt like, we couldn't be sure of the Wi-Fi access, the use of the equipment, various technical things that might go wrong. So I think that might have as well held us back. And I think those things are now developing along the way. What I've learnt with that is, yes, that is something that will happen. And you accommodate for it. So you find different ways of getting around technical problems, or whilst there's a kind of Wi-Fi outage, you do something else, so you can be flexible. You shouldn't be afraid of it. You will also have students who know a lot more than you do. You'll have some students who know a lot less than you do, and that will be a surprise because you kind of think, these young people, particularly of my age, you think for these young people, they know far more than me, but actually it's quite mixed. But there will be students who know more than you, and you want to embrace those people. You want to identify those as potential leaders within collaborative teamwork who can take projects forward, and also you can learn a lot of techniques from them as well.
What we sort of discovered along the way of this work as well was the importance of that co-learning environment when you're working with these kind of tools, because as you say, there's such a mixed range of abilities that it's really important that you have that kind of sense of osmosis between what knowledge some people have and some don't, and how they can feed off one another, including yourself as the teacher. And I think that's really a really valuable sort of tool to develop within your cohort.
Yeah, and really supports, the final major project in the first year is a collaborative performance project. So right from the beginning, if you begin to work with these digital tools in performance work, you start that collaboration with each other in terms of skill set, what skills some people have, what skills other people have, and what you can all bring to the performance party.
We trialled different models throughout the 3 years of working together. And one is, I'm calling it the digital circuit training model, which actually was based on your classic circuit training sort of idea, where we brought in different digital tools and had them set up at different stations in a regular workshop setting. And each station had different tasks assigned to them and a different tool that they would be exploring within that task time. And this was really interesting for me. It was a sort of prototyping experiment for me as a researcher to see what types of tools and tasks the students would find engaging, and to ascertain whether the use of simple tools such as microphones, cameras, projectors could actually encourage that digital creativity towards performance making, and maybe open up their eyes to some different aesthetics that they'd maybe not explored before. Could you maybe explain a little bit about how you brought some of these ideas into the curriculum and into your practice?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I will say for teachers who are working on the UAL qualifications is that they are very broad and very open for interpretation, which is wonderful. They don't pin you down with any kind of specified indicative content. So actually, if you look at the curriculum through a digital frame, virtually all of the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria can be viewed with an eye to using digital performance technology as part of the assessment. So kind of right from Unit 1, where we're looking at the introduction of the principles of performance, they can apply their understanding of technical digital skills. So you can start to bring it right in at the beginning. Moving on into Unit 2, engaging with an audience, which I worked with Stacie on a digital Christmas show. We created a digital virtual Christmas card to send out to junior school children. So our target audience were junior schools. And the students were able to meet the assessment criteria by looking at ways to communicate meaning on the digital stage and compare that to how they may have communicated meaning through the live stage. So here you can just bring it in right even at those earlier units. Even in Introduction to Professional Practice, they can look at the roles within digital performance work, and they can see how they can add those opportunities in for all of the performers.
As I mentioned before, we started this work by working with one student group to develop this digital circuit training model. And from that work, we then transferred all of what we'd learned into a smaller package of work, which was sort of a 2-week intensive period where I worked with a smaller group of students, where we explored the same tools, but we explored them in an intensive environment towards a performance. And we decided right at the beginning, as the student group decided, that they wanted to create something that they could invite an audience to. So this is pre-pandemic, and actually it was the very beginning of last year that we did this project, so January 2020. And the students created what I guess could be described as an installation performance. So it had live performance, pre-recorded material, projection. They also used their mobile phones as sort of repositories for films that they could then show the audience at different parts within this show that they developed. And I think it was a really interesting transition, seeing them sort of in that first state when they were working with the tools initially. They were quite nervous actually. There wasn't initial excitement that I thought there could be with exploring the tools in some way, because the students seemed rather nervous to fail or to sort of trial things or to experiment. So I think it took quite a long time for us to get to a stage where then they were willing to just be open and play and not want to create something that looked polished and perfect at the end. What do you think about that?
I think that's very true, that the student feels like they're under the spotlight a bit to create a wonderful performance and feeling like they're always judged all the time. So it was nice to kind of get a group of students to start thinking about play working within the digital performance materials, and also to get them to not think so literally about theatre. I think that's the wonderful thing about working with different mediums such as digital technologies, is we move away from literal theatre.
I think actually, Anne, we found it quite interesting, didn't we, together, that once we'd started exploring Isadora, which is, you know, the node-based graphic programming environment that we explored with the students, that was a mini transition period when actually they started to understand maybe more abstract aesthetics and how that could be used as a concept for theatre and making theatre. But before then, yes, it's that literal thinking. It's definitely been, I would say, a bit of a barrier towards this work as well.
Yes. I think if you've got students who do enjoy dance and enjoy that kind of crossover between physical theatre and dance and drama, then you're probably going to get some nice responses from them, especially with the use of Isadora. I think for those students who want something to be very naturalistic, it kind of a bit blew their minds sometimes.
So this year, so mid-pandemic, we came together in September and we planned it was a 6-week digital performance making series workshop which led up to this then Christmas show, which unfortunately I couldn't be in the space with you when you were making stuff at that point because of lockdowns and such things. But actually we'd structured 6 weeks of material which broke down that initial circuit training model into weekly workshops. So perhaps maybe do you want to tell us a little bit about how that experience was, Anne?
Yeah, so they were a new group. So they were really open, and they were really encouraged to be, trying new things out, to try out new ideas. And so that was lovely. And I think that way of coming to the work with an open-mindedness. So we had lots of opportunities just to play with some of the technologies. Now, at the beginning, what I did was that I asked students what their access was to smartphones, iPhones. Interestingly enough, out of my group, everyone, apart from one student, had an iPhone. So that kind of gave us an idea as to what students had in terms of a resource that they could bring to the group. And then we started to kind of take one by one some of the apps on the phone and exploring those within the workshops that Stacie was providing for us. So, for example, one week we looked at GarageBand, the app of GarageBand, and we looked at Foley sound making. And the students had great fun in just trying to make and record different sounds using the GarageBand app. Some of them had experience of that app. Some of them, like myself, sat on the phone, never did anything with it. It was just there. So then they could see, oh, yes, here I've got a sound recording possibility here within my palm, really. So it was about looking week by week at those apps, iMovie, Movie Maker, looking at how you can use those effectively in order just to create short performance materials. Isadora required a little bit more than just what they had in their phone, but what we taught them in terms of using iMovie, they were then able to import into Isadora and create the effects on Isadora. So for each one of these little workshops, circuit workshops, we'd choose a theme and we'd maybe have some stimulus text or an idea that we wanted them to explore. So for 1 week we looked at the opening to Alice and Ventures in Wonderland, and we brought that text into them, and then they explored that text or items on that text through Isadora. And a lot of them had commented on the kind of dreamlike state that Isadora created. So another week we came with them with creating dreams using Isadora, and also using you as a live performer in front of the projections. So it was just having a stimulus, which could either be a text or just a topic, an idea, taking an app that they all had access to on a phone or through a college projector and laptop, and just having an opportunity to play. And there not being a specific project in mind, just that chance to say, you can play, and we can show back little sample bits that we've made, but no one's being judged. We just want to let you get experience with the app, let you think about its performative quality and what you could potentially do with it before we then moved on to actually forming a project around assessment. So as I always work with students, at the beginning of any project I start with them, it's all about skill sharing, it's all about skill building. And so this was 6 weeks. We put a day aside, so 6 days of skill building and skill sharing to really make them feel confident about thinking about then how they could then take that through into the final performance.
Yeah, and I think some of the sort of the key areas or the sort of critical points within those 6 weeks for me were when suddenly they became audience members and they could see potentially the impact of these tools on how your audience interacts with the work, or how you communicate that meaning to an audience. I think there were some really interesting responses because we also integrated WhatsApp, and we had different productions, different sharings, little show sharings, where the students would have created maybe 2 different sound files that the audience could listen to, choose which one they wanted to listen to in order to then pair that with what they were seeing live in the space. And obviously these 2 different sound recordings offered very different experiences for the audience. And I think that was kind of a really kind of wow moment for some of the students, thinking, okay, so how can I bring this in and make the audience have a very different experience to maybe what I've ever experienced as an audience member before. Because obviously the students initially sort of said that their experience of seeing live shows was actually quite limited throughout the whole of this project. I think all students fed back saying they'd seen very limited live shows, and if they had, it was more kind of musicals, pantomimes.
Yeah. Right at the beginning, I get students to give me a database of all the things that they've seen, so I can kind of get a view of what their experiences of theatre. And yes, it is, as you'd expect, quite limited for where they're living, limited in terms of what they can afford to go and see. So it's really, I see it's quite a duty of us as level 3 tutors to open up that world of theatre that they might not have had experience through school or through their own amateur dramatics clubs and societies, just showing them a little bit more of the alternative. And the alternative is where we get new ideas developing that will eventually become mainstream. So it was interesting for them to see how important experimentation is, even for the established shows that they go to see.
I think another thing as well was that idea that we sort of promoted, Anne, which was this idea of prototyping your work as you develop it. So it's based on various different types of learning, mainly from kind of computer programming, this kind of hacking approach where you'll just make something and then maybe it's not perfect, so you just make it again. So it's like iteration, but using that as an approach to devising with these tools as well. And I think that was something that perhaps students weren't really comfortable with initially, but then that really grew with the experimentation, because initially the idea was, okay, well, we've got an idea, we just want to run with this, and this is our final idea, which obviously is very limiting in the way that idea develops creatively or imaginatively. So I think, yes, sort of getting them engaged with this idea of rapid prototyping was also a really interesting sort of concept within this work.
The more you can build that into your scheme of work with the students, into your lesson plan with the students, is to get them to create prototypes and then to review, and then be also prepared to go, actually, no, we're not going to go down that line because we can see how that's not working or it's not communicating in the way that we'd like it to communicate. So stop students going too far down a rabbit hole, as it were, and makes them think about, it could be this, but it could be that, and let's see how the audience respond to it. So very much like performance constantly being evaluated and adapted in response to that evaluation through showing it to fellow class members.
Can you sort of explain how your students responded to the work, and perhaps what the benefits of this type of approach might be?
Some of the work they have found challenging. And when you're challenged, you're a little bit nervous of it. Other work that they've been able to really get engaged with, and most of them were able to manage the technologies, they've really embraced it and found it to be a lot of fun. So I think that's good, because then you've got this continuum of from this is fun, this is easy, this is quite quick, quite spontaneous in terms of what they want material to be a lot of the time, to this is a little bit more challenging, this will have to make me think a little bit harder, I'll have to develop my ideas here. So the use of these technologies allows for that differentiation of outcome by the student, allowing students at whatever skill level to come into the work and to develop the work. So the students have responded, I think, really positively to it. So, for example, I think because Isadora isn't so literal, maybe some of the ones who like their theatre to be a bit more literal kind of backed away from that, whereas the performers who particularly like working on that edge between dance, physical theatre, could really see the use of Isadora and screen projection. Whereas I had a lot of students who loved the use of green screen and filming with green screen. And we had a lot of fun working with both green and blue screen. And I could really recommend, that is a worthwhile investment for any drama department, is to get a very, very large piece of green fabric and a very, very large piece of blue fabric, so that you can do green and blue screen, because it's wonderful for filming in terms of creating sets.
It also really introduced that idea of how the performers are going to be working with both virtual and live spaces simultaneously, didn't it? It really sort of helped that thought process to get them engaged with that kind of work. One of the key things in the student responses for me was that they felt that potentially this work opened up new opportunities for them and made them feel confident about maybe applying for university courses. I mean, the last students that I worked with last year, they said that they felt really glad to have done the project because it gave them something to set them apart when they were at the university interviews. So it's interesting that they're sort of recognising this work as something that is valuable for the future and is also really relevant to them.
Yeah. And within the curriculum itself, I mean, we have a production course that runs separately to our acting programme. But as you know, within the curriculum, there's a unit which is about production skills and context that performers have to go through. And so I think this is a wonderful opportunity working with the digital work, because it's all held within the actor's hand, it's all very accessible, whereas maybe learning to rig lights and make costumes and things like this not so accessible given the time frame, that actually provides a wonderful context, the digital work, for that Unit 5, for actors working with production skills, and definitely gave them confidence with working within production work and thinking about the production work for their own final performances.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sort of feels like these types of skills, the audio visual skills that we've kind of looked at and highlighted, they're not really specialist skills for a performer anymore. They need to be integrated as part of their toolkit to sort of help them with future work and even, transitioning to higher education. It's the way the world of performance is moving, and something that they need to be equipped for.
Yes, definitely. Even just getting jobs, actor friends of mine are, saying the self-tape is king at the moment in terms of audition. It was happening anyway, but now a lot of the castings that used to take place in the West End no longer do. Everything is all about making your own tape. So even just teaching those kind of basic filming skills is really, really useful. All the drama schools now are inviting people due to the pandemic to send in their audition tapes. So just learning how to edit your material, how to film and frame your material, these are kind of key skills for our acting students to learn.
And of course, there's the huge influx of remote performance. And finding ways to create live feeling performances in online spaces. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen or watch this discussion, and a very special thank you to Anne Molloy for joining me and for her continued support of all the research. And if you would like to know more about this work or how you might start to integrate some of this work into your own practice, then I'd love to hear from you. And you can find my contact information at www.stacieleebennett-worth.com, and you can find out more about the projects and the research there too. If you are interested in taking part in a UAL CPD session yourself and you want to know more about what's going on, what the programme has on offer, then please get in touch with UAL at ual.cpd@arts.ac.uk, and there'll be someone there who can help you. Thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care.